Welcome to Inside Bitcoin.
Hey, good to be here.
You know, I was looking at the charts this morning, and it's just the usual story.
Oh, yeah?
Green candles, red candles, everyone's screaming about price action. It's a lot of noise.
It always is.
And today, we're going to cut right through all of that. We are stepping away from the price charts to look at a storm that's brewing right in the heart of the ecosystem.
It really is a storm. And it's a conflict happening deep in the technical layers, but the implications are, well, they're massive.
Right.
It's funny you mention the noise, because on the surface, Bitcoin presents this very united front. But if you peel back the layers, there are these deep philosophical divides resurfacing.
And honestly, reading the material for today, it feels like we're watching a sequel to a movie we all saw years ago.
Huh, that's a good way to put it.
But the director just threw in a massive plot twist.
History doesn't repeat, but in Bitcoin, it certainly rhymes.
So before we get into the weeds, and we are going to get into the weeds today, I need to give credit where it's due. This research comes from Mo and the Mostradamus research team.
And they put together a fiery take on it.
Fiery is the right word, to put it mildly. So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack BIP 110 and the NOTS client. But more importantly, why this research argues this is, and I'm quoting here, a hostile attack on Bitcoin.
It's a strong claim. Usually you think of a hostile attack as, a government ban or something external.
An outside enemy.
Exactly. But what we're talking about here is an internal struggle. It's a civil war.
So let's set the board. We hear Bitcoin Core all the time, but now we have NOTS and BIP 110. What are we actually looking at?
Right. Basics first. Bitcoin Core is the dominant software, the reference implementation. Think of it like Google Chrome for the internet.
It's the standard.
It's the standard. About 98% of the network runs it. It defines the consensus rules.
Okay, so if Core says a block is valid, the network generally agrees.
Essentially, yes. Now, NOTS is an alternative, like Firefox or Brave. It does the same job, but with different tweaks.
And having alternatives is usually good, right, for decentralization?
It is. Diversity is resilience. You don't want a monoculture. But the controversy comes from a push to activate a specific proposal, BIP 110, using only the NOTS client through something called a user-activated soft fork, a UASF.
User-activated soft fork. On paper, that sounds great.
It does.
Power to the people, right. We're not waiting for miners. The users are deciding?
In theory, yes. It sounds noble, but context is everything. This research frames it as a hostile takeover attempt by a minority. It draws a direct parallel to the Civil War of 2017.
The block size wars. I remember that. Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash. That was ugly.
It was incredibly ugly. Back then, you had the big blockers who wanted to change the rules to make blocks bigger.
Right.
But here's the key distinction, and this is crucial. In 2017, the attackers were trying to loosen the rules with a hard fork. They wanted to allow more data.
Okay, expand the parameters. And this time,
the BIP 110 movement is trying to constrict the rules with a soft fork to censor transactions they don't like. The argument is this isn't a tech upgrade. It's an ideological movement to control what you can do on the network.
That's a fascinating flip. So 2017 was let us do more, and now it's you're doing too much, stop it.
In a nutshell, yes. And that brings us to this idea of the decentralization triangle.
A triangle, I like it. What are the 3 points?
Code, mining, and nodes. The thesis is that BIP 110 attacks all 3 of these points at the same time.
Okay, let's take this one by one. Start with code, because we always hear code is law, but someone has to write that law.
Exactly. Code is written by humans. Yeah. And for a project to be decentralized, that whole process has to be transparent.
Right.
Bitcoin Core, for all its faults, is historically very transparent. We know the developers. You can go on GitHub, see the contributions from years ago. You know who's touching the engine.
Their receipts are there. You know who to blame if something breaks.
Precisely. The problem with this BIP 110 and NOTS movement, according to the research, is that the dev team is opaque. It's centralized around a very small group.
It's more of a black box.
A total black box compared to Core.
And this is where the research got a little spicy. I laughed out loud when I read this part.
Oh, I know the line you're talking about.
The source basically said, aside from maybe 1 or 2 known people, he wouldn't trust these people to code his website, let alone the global monetary protocol.
It's a harsh critique, I admit. But strip away the insult and look at the risk. If this fork activates, you are essentially firing the current core developers.
Pushing them aside.
You're pushing aside hundreds of people with years of institutional memory who know where all the skeletons are buried in the code.
And you're handing the keys to a small, less transparent group. You're swapping seasoned engineers for a shadow team.
You're trading a meritocracy for a closed garden. And that is a massive centralization risk.
Okay, so that's the code corner. Let's move to the second point, mining. This feels like the most technical part.
It is. This is where we get into the op return controversy.
Op return, I've seen that on Twitter. It's the little space in a transaction where you can leave a note, right? The memo line.
Basically, yeah, it lets you store arbitrary data. The context here is the whole debate over spam. Ordinals, runes, JPEGs on the blockchain.
The cartoon monkeys.
Right. The BIP 110 proponents hate this. They see it as graffiti, cluttering up the cathedral.
So they want to restrict it.
They want to choke it off.
Yeah.
But here is the curveball. Bitcoin Core recently increased the op return limit from 80 bytes up to 100 kilobytes.
Oh, wait, hold on. Walk me through that. If everyone's complaining about spam, why would Core make the spam folder bigger? That feels like fighting a fire with gasoline.
That's the intuitive assumption, right? But Mo's research highlights a fascinating paradox here. It argues that increasing the limit actually makes mining more fair.
More fair. How does allowing massive data chunks lead to more fairness? I'm struggling with that.
It all comes down to the under-the-table problem.
Under the table.
Or out-of-band payments. Imagine the limit is tiny, say 80 bytes, but I really want to put my big JPEG on-chain, and I'm willing to pay for it. The protocol says no.
But the miners can just ignore that rule if they want.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
you go to a miner and say, hey, I'll pay you 5 Bitcoin, just slip this in the back door. You pay them off-chain.
An under-the-table deal.
Right. But here's the problem. Who can you make that deal with?
Well, someone who actually finds blocks consistently.
There you go. You can't pay a small home miner who finds a block once every 3 years. You need a massive mining pool that finds a block every hour.
Oh, I see where this is going. So if the data is banned, only the big cartel mining pools can take the bribe?
Correct. It creates an exclusive secret revenue stream that only the biggest players can access. It centralizes power and profits. The little guy gets cut out completely.
So by banning the data, you create a black market that centralizes mining. You make the big guys richer.
Precisely. Now flip it. If you increase the limit officially, that user doesn't need a secret deal. They just broadcast the transaction with a standard on-chain fee.
And that fee is visible to everyone.
And crucially, any miner, big or small, can claim it if they find the block. It levels the playing field. It democratizes the fees.
Wow. That is a huge aha moment. So the restriction actually creates the corruption.
That's the argument. By trying to stop spam, BIP 110 would accidentally empower the largest mining cartels.
It's like prohibition. Banning it didn't stop it. It just created the mafia.
It's economic reality versus ideological purity.
Okay. Code, mining. Let's hit the third point of the triangle. Nodes.
Right, the user part. The BIP 110 camp says we need more nodes. Their logic is if we block spam, the chain stays small and more people can run nodes.
Which sounds good. Don't trust. Verify. We want everyone running a node.
We do. But the source argues quality matters more than quantity. And this leads to what they call the scare tactic.
This is the part about illegal content, right? That people will put terrible things on the blockchain and suddenly running a node becomes a crime.
That is the fear they are leveraging. But the research debunks this pretty thoroughly. The Bitcoin protocol only stores text, hexadecimal code. It doesn't store images.
It's just strings of numbers and letters. Gibberish.
Exactly. To see an image, you need third-party software to render it. It's like the internet. Your router transmits all kinds of data, but it's not illegal. You need a browser to find and display the bad stuff.
That makes sense. The blockchain doesn't have a screen.
Right. And here, the host used a really strong analogy from the research. He said if you're too much of a snowflake, too fragile to run a node because you're scared of some text data, then maybe you shouldn't be running a node at all.
Wow. Snowflake. That's not pulling any punches. That's basically saying toughen up.
It's blunt, but the point is about resilience. We need robust nodes that resist censorship, not nodes that filter data based on what they think is spam.
Because it's a slippery slope.
Of course. Today, it's a JPEG of a monkey. Tomorrow, it's a transaction from a political dissident.
Or a donation to a protest movement.
Exactly. If you build the machinery to filter the silly stuff, you've just built the machinery to filter the important stuff, and someone will demand to use it.
Which brings us to the warning from the past. Let's connect it back to 2017.
Well, this is about the user-activated soft fork, the UASF. In 2017, the community used a UASF to save Bitcoin, to activate SegWit when miners were stalling.
So it was the hero's weapon back then. the users taking control back.
It was a beautiful moment. But even then, developers warned that this was a break glass in case of emergency tool. They feared it could be weaponized by a minority in the future.
They were worried about setting a precedent.
And the conclusion here is that their fear has become reality. BIP 110 is that weaponized UASF. It's a minority, mostly loud voices on crypto Twitter, trying to override the consensus of the network.
So the tool used to save Bitcoin's decentralization is now being used to attack it.
That's the irony. It shows the biggest threat to Bitcoin isn't always from the outside.
So zooming out, what's the big takeaway for the average listener who just holds some Bitcoin and wants to know it's safe?
The takeaway is that Bitcoin's resilience comes from its resistance to change. The friction is a feature, not a bug. The fact that this fight is happening and that it's so hard for one side to win is proof that Bitcoin is working.
Transparency versus opacity. Resilience versus fragility. A real battle for the soul of the protocol.
It really is. And for you, the listener, the question is, do you want a protocol that protects your feelings by filtering spam, or one that protects your freedom by allowing anyone to broadcast anything?
You can't have both.
You have to choose a curated garden or a wild jungle. And Bitcoin was built to be the jungle.
That is a heavy thought to leave us with. It's not just tech support drama. It's about the fundamental properties of the system.
Indeed. Much more than just software versions.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. If you want to continue the conversation and stay updated on Bitcoin price action and developments across the Bitcoin DMT ecosystem, check out the Discord link in the description or on the channel where Mo will be sharing ongoing research, insights, and updates. We'll see you next time on Inside Bitcoin.